Rinpoche first invites us to enter into this morning's teaching, thinking that we are studying and practice Dharma with the intention of bringing all sentient beings throughout the infinity of space to the state of utterly pure, most perfect and precious enlightenment. And we carry on with our studies of the text pointing out or pointing to the Dharmakaya. There are many sections in this text, and at present we're in the section which deals with deep insight and vipassana. In the sections that we are studying, then these are the ones which prepare the mind for the pointing out to its nature, or these are the ones which, through exercises and through questions, enable the mind to come to know itself, and this happens in 5 main stages. Until now, we've considered 3 of these. The first was becoming aware of the mind in stillness, then in movement, and then being aware of the relation between those two, stillness and movement, whether they're 2 or 1, and so on. As far as mind itself is concerned, then those 3 stages cover everything to do with mind. Apart from the mind when it's still or when it's moving, or understanding the relationship between those 2 main aspects of the mind, there isn't anything else.
대마도비다.
So either the mind is still, or the mind is moving. This means it's thinking, it's active, it's busy thinking, and then it has to be the case that either those two things, that either stillness and thinking are two quite different things, or that they are the same mind. So the first two of the three cover the possibilities of mind's action, and the third shows us how also it has to be the one or the two, and there's nothing else.
Tina tate kechaya boji de tangsuna no no ga gamje tong katwa de tin khako tsaware telmanu ba mandu.
If we can understand the mind through working on those exercises and practices, then we'll understand everything about the mind. Everything.
당가로서 달라나 용 희자지 시지히나 다 조노가 산 니바다 조 산레라 이야나 드바지고나 파제 카토가 산레 세공이래 니바다 조노 산레라나 산레 라고마레 산마레 라고마레 야 드니 조노 인저와다 산레라나 산레 라고지레 되면 산마레 파제 라지마리 더니 다 조롱 센지오레서 센니오레라나 센지오레레 되면 센니오 마리 세 라마리 드리키야 온지리 마티나.
If somebody were to ask, we're talking about this. We're talking about the settled mind. Excuse me. They're talking about the settled mind. Then the mind. If you say when there's peace, when there's shamatha, if somebody says, "What is peaceful? Is it the mind?" Then nearly everyone would say yes. If you ask what's peaceful, is it the mind? They'd say yes. Very few people would say it's not the mind which is peaceful when there's shamatha. People would say yes. When we look at the mind that's thinking, that's in movement, and if you say, is this the mind? Is it the mind that's thinking? Then most people would say, yes, it's the mind. It's the mind that's thinking, of course. Wouldn't say no. And then if you asked, well, stillness and thinking, does that mean there's one mind or two mind? Most people would say, one mind.
다 조롱소 니바더 샘마리 생캔두 요나 라바초.
Who would say that shamatha nepisimde nepadi sem
mare 생캔 요나 라바초.
Okay. So of you, if we ask the question, how many of you would say that shamatha is not the mind? It's not the mind which is peaceful. How many would say it isn't the mind? Put up your hand, please.
다 가슴하고 니바도 생레라니 라바조지 문디 야야 다 생겨와도 생마리 생캔두 저와도 생마리 생캔 요나 라바초.
If there's anyone who thinks that when we're thinking and the mind is that when there are thoughts and there is movement, who would say that isn't the mind that's thinking, that isn't the mind that's moving? Put up your hand, please.
야, 뭔디? 가슴하고 저와도 생레라두. 다 생 니오레리 생캔 요나 라바초. 생 니오 생지 되면 미나 라바초 거문디. 생 니 요캔 요나 라바초.
Who would say that stillness, which we've now all agreed, stillness is the mind, all agreed, movement changes the mind. So then, who would think that means there are two minds? If you think it's just one mind, don't put up your hand. If you think it's two minds, please put up your hand. So we're all agreed, one mind. If you did meditate the other day, these last days, on what is the mind, how is it, where does it come from, how is it, and so on. If you did, don't bother putting up your hand. But if you didn't, please put up your hand. If you haven't done those meditations, yes. If you haven't, yeah. So then, apart from the few who haven't done the practices, then the rest have been meditating on this. You've been looking at the mind, and then just now, when we took the vote or the on-the-spot poll, then we've seen that we're all agreed that peaceful concentration is the mind, that change and thinking and activity is the mind, and that mind is only one. So now I'd like to ask you a question. Those who've been meditating, is it the case that sometimes the meditation goes well and sometimes it's not well? Sometimes is it good? Sometimes is it bad? Sometimes is it a bit better? Sometimes is it a bit worse? Well, hands up. So it seems most people are agreed sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. So now this gives us something to think about.
nga nyu gamara nga pena nga dawo sen ina ta ngi nga nyu na kamo kawan di nga nyu na nga dawo chodere nga chi de mera nga ni wona nga chi di nga yen ba nyu chondu ta nga chi de me na ta nga chi di te nga nyu na te nga dawo ra sen chi de me na te ni sen koron de me chi nyu na te nga dawo chodu ya 달라서 어느 정도 근데 다 고아야 보지 라디오나 되니 뒤도 받아 오다 된지 세니다 뉴효레에서 하고 근데 때 고아 라면나 괜찮아 고히면 돼.
In fact, we have a couple of things to think about. We've just seen through this poll that most people have been meditating, so that means they've been, according to these instructions, letting the mind look at itself, see how it is, where it comes from, where it goes, all these things that we've been doing. And then, on the basis of that, the total majority vote was that there is just one mind. Then the same people who've been meditating and looking at the mind, who say there's one mind, have said that sometimes the mind is good and sometimes the mind is bad, that there are differences. Also, they've said that the mind is one. Now, for instance, if we take one person and they say, now I've met myself, that's a crazy person's talk. If there are two people, and you say, oh yes, I met this person, then that makes a lot of sense, that you find or you discover the mind, that you discover another person, you meet another person, that makes a lot of sense. But when you've just got one person saying, I met myself, it's crazy people's talk, because you already are yourself.
Then sen ni wana ji ge ji ni chu ndu ya bu di na ha ko gong ji me ji cai na de ce chu ndu then sen ji de me na da ko ni de na nyong ba dou chao de nga be na nga ro nga ka ban de ji sun de na ndi la ma de nyong ba de de ji de ni na ni ke sa dou de sen ji na ya de ta go ya pro ndi ka rin dou de so.
If there are two people, they can meet each other. If there are two minds, then one mind can meet, can discover, can look for, and can find and meet another part of the mind. If there are two minds, then we can have one bit looking at the other bit, or one mind looking at another mind. If there's only one, then any talk of looking for yourself, or looking for itself, just like a person looking for himself, herself, or the mind looking for itself, any talk of looking for itself and meeting itself is just crazy talk.
Yomena se ni, yomena nyoma do. Yomena ta rong ni chu zi ji de, de xian ji de. Yona de ni ga ri zo yin de. 다 뉴초지 요바 요지마리 기 때문에 맨날 기 가르쳐 뉴지메 기 이래 사디디라 뉴고사 요마 말에 니 요는 기 뉴초라 달라 손노 해자지 동 고아야 보지런데 제레디 손노 동하 세거든.
So this gives us something to think about. If it's one thing, it's one thing. It's one mind, it's one thing. There's one thing that one thing would look for itself, that would find itself, doesn't make much sense. If there's two things, that one meets the other, one eventually finds the other, one knows the other, one bothers looking for the other one, that makes a lot of sense. If it's just the one, then how can it be that that one thing is looking for itself. How could that actually happen? Something to think about.
다 기든 로송 다 니바 다 가린다고 지르잖아 다 조로서 니바 생활에 라래 저와 생활에 라래 니가 생활에 라래 생활기디만 요바 말에 라래 가통하고 토모 니는 뭐 요소 가통하고 달라서 다 고라 까까리 야본디 까까리 야본문디 라바레 다 니디나 다 고야보 첸다 무수사데 다 고야보도 가리리 고야보 많이 봐도 가리리 이제 들어가지고나 다 뭐뭐 치야디 가리라안디라나 니 봐도 고야보 쩐디 뭐야 많이나 고 뒤쪽에 라디 뭐뭐 먹듯이 라디 다 파세 초로서고 까까를 고야본디 까까를 고야본문디 라지다 니빠도 고야본 니빠 요거나 더 고야보레 텐도 인지레 나 조조라고 우니미히 조로서 가리 뭐야 조로서 고 까까를 야본문디 라지다 인저와 너도 뭐뭐 인저와달라 파레 세도 인지레 나 텐디 맞지 조로서 온 냠바 요나 미히데 당가로 거 파응지세나 뭐뭐 지하들이 라고인데 조로서 고 파생 같은 인지레 나 텐디.
So then, the general consensus, and the consensus among the people who've been looking at the mind, was that mind is one, it's not two. But then, if they've been looking at the mind, when it's that mind, or when there is peacefulness, peaceful shamatha, peaceful concentration, that state, and then there's been an awareness within thinking and busyness, that state, is that saying that they are the same? Are they the same? And then also, when we just took the vote and asking, does the meditation, is it sometimes good, is it sometimes bad? Then the answer was, it is sometimes good, sometimes bad. And Rinpoche says he doesn't know because we didn't ask lots of questions, and he doesn't know because he can't see into your minds and your own practice. But he can take a pretty good guess that when you say that the meditation is sometimes good, that means that your mind is sometimes settled and peaceful and feeling good. And that sometimes when you say the meditation is not so good, your mind is busy and not settled and scattered or whatever it is. Probably the case.
다 변하는 야보동 두분인 가발이 더니 너한테 요바 말이 고로니 변나 매도 천다고 그래 쳐와나 매요바 말이 매요나 쳐와 말아 가반다고 야보도 두분이 가가래 저 말이 더이나는 다 생기 되면 매래 다 생기 되면 매나 다 생기라 야보두보도 가르쳐려고 야보두보니 가와라 더이나 다 말어서 고 야보 고한테도 두보 고한테니 생기리 기나는 다 야보두보도 제줄려고 생기 되면 매래 지그티도라 야보두보니 마스바래 가와라 때들이 인디텔라나 조로서가 니바다 야보이 저와다 야보면지 지찬다고 조로 두 니바 생레 라히두 저와 생레 라히두 생안 기디면디 라히두 디 다트 가리라고 그래 되니 야 다 생기이나 생각 롱셔도 껴봐 쳐도 지리 나디나 생고 용한테 가리어디나 디 용한테도 생기디면 메디 니 원나도 용한테 가 줘지리 용한테 만져봐 요리 되니 네바 생아리도나 코롱 네바 돌이 생아들 용한테 가리어나 네바래 요지리 단 저와도 생이나 되니 생아들 용한테 가리어도 저와들 요지리 띵들라 되니 다 건 두포도 건 야보 가리래 레고 가와치야지 가리래 고 뭐야 따라서 어느 동거도
If we understand what Rinpoche is telling us, then it gives us something to think about. Because good is one thing, bad is another thing. Not only are they different, they're actually opposites of each other. They're very different qualities. It's like fire and water. Fire and water are each other's opposites. They're very, very different in their qualities. If they're different, if the meditation, that is to say your mind, if the mind is in a good state, good mind, bad mind, then what's all this about one mind? Just one mind. If mind is one, then one means it's one thing with a certain nature, certain qualities. If it's one thing, it can't be good and bad. They're opposite qualities. It's two different qualities. So then how can we say that it's one? And then if we're thinking that mind when it's settled is good, settled, good, one thing, mind busy, bad, another thing, then on what reason, if we've observed that, can we say it's just one thing? It's just one thing, mind. If it were one thing, it would have constant qualities. It would be constantly settled. It would be constantly busy. It would be constantly good. It would be constantly bad if it were one thing. So what's the reason for saying it's one? If it's one, it has to have one nature. And so if it's two, then it can have different qualities. Two or three or more, then having different qualities makes sense. There's this type of mind, that type of mind, 2 minds, 3 minds, 4 minds. Something to think about.
다 고야 보런디 로만디 야보선도 동근디 다잘라 당원이 세노고 뇨뇨래니 다 생각이 네바다 문이 ndrendi 문이 바든 ndrendi 체반 ndrendi 체반 메나 체반 메동 ndrendi 요나 요동 ndrendi 더니 고아종보 냠바세 ndrendi 세노 야보고 알아서 그러던데 힌두 다들 희원아 더니 다 가서 미 받으라 고타바리 더니 힘이나 뭐야 건가바리
When we really do the practice, then we come to know the mind at first hand, and we not only explore this topic, we become very clear about points like this. When the mind is settled, and as we develop this awareness of the settled mind, or let's just say when there is, without using the word mind, because it makes it more complicated, when there is shamatha, then there is an understanding of, yes, shamatha is just like this. This is how it is, and it's known thoroughly. When there are thoughts and movement and change, then that becomes known through a great deal of experience, just how it is. And then, on the basis of that real experience, not one glimpse or one conclusion, but long, definite investigation, then one clearly has experienced the difference between peaceful abiding, movement of thoughts, and then this feeling of this is good meditation, this is how meditation ought to be, this is bad meditation, it's not gone in the right direction, and so on. This is very clearly understood from within, for what it is. Had we done enough of this meditation, we'd have had the answers to these questions. And if we don't yet have the clear answers to these questions, if we're still wondering and confused by this sort of dialogue we've had, then it shows there's a need for more practice. So the first 3 of the 5 points cover the what is called the inner mind or the inner. And first, if we're really practicing Mahamudra, then they need to be worked with and developed until there is true understanding. And this understanding means that we've come to recognize the nature of the mind at peace, the mind when it's moving. We've become familiar with that. It's known totally well, and from there we can go on. The point is understanding. If the understanding doesn't emerge, then it's a waste of time going on to further practice. These first 3 points of what the mind is need to be worked with until such time as a very enormous familiarity and understanding has been achieved. Now, maybe not everyone agrees with this. Some people's innate feeling might be, all of this sitting down, investigating, thinking, even if it's subtle thinking, this contemplating the nature of the mind at rest, the mind when it's moving, the relationship between the two, and so on and so forth, one mind, two minds, they might think this isn't meditation. They might think this spoils meditation by somehow interrupting the peacefulness, the absorbed state, to start poking around and asking questions like this. They might think this interrupts or breaks the meditation. They might feel it's much better just to sit and let some sort of state emerge, just to sit within the calmness, and then somehow realization will emerge through that. But it's really, this is just shamatha, those peaceful feelings, that pleasantness, the absorption. This is the very nature of shamatha. So people, because they identify that with meditation, they might feel that this sort of investigation is not meditation, or not the deepest meditation. So if anyone thinks like that, as far as our teachings are concerned, it's a mistake. Very clearly that's a mistake. The reason that we go into shamatha meditation, concentration meditation, is with one objective, and that objective is to be able to practice insight, to be able to find the insight that we call vipassana. And the idea of practicing shamatha is not to work towards some comfortable mind state we can sink into. That's not the objective at all. The objective of shamatha is to give us some basis whereby we can start working on that insight. And it's a mistake to see the peaceful absorption as being the objective. The objective is insight. Shamatha is therefore vipassana. And if we take an analogy, it's like food. We eat food because we need food to stay alive. If we don't eat, we die. The main reason that we are eating every day is because we need that to stay alive. It's the reason we eat. The reason that we practice shamatha and develop shamatha is because we need it in order to then work on that basis to find insight.
Tani tadang ngaro sono tongje tata karejina lantong hiji tandare lantong doje tandare tani na yini janje tongji dono dadati gang sabare muni ta lantong doji tani sono tongje lantong haku ngocho gare tani didera yini 이 janji tongji tata tere sono tongjo tong sabare muni se gang ti sa dio bare patina gang me para sono re tongde jireti te hene yo sono mo tongdo hene gang jo pa mara ji chen do ndu gondiwa dibatem sono me pa ji yo ba bare hene la te na no ta tata tere sono je ta yo dona no gang je bare to gang re the gang noni hine dono ti gang zon bare ti hore hine gang dono data ti gang ti yo bare gare jina noni lantong teka de hakoji data tare hine da te ti chen mi de pa jin da wo tendi re te na teni gang data ti sono tong de gang ya bare ti gang sa bare
Gon sapa
samo.
Oh. So then this way that we've been learning of looking at the mind within first shamatha and then afterwards when we're used to that when it's moving is very definitely meditation. We should be very clear first of all that this is meditation, and not only is it meditation, it is profound meditation. This is what insight meditation means. This questioning, which is in one way a subtle form of thinking, because even though we're not making big thoughts, we're not getting lost in thought, we're not being discursive in the thought, nevertheless, in a very subtle way, we are thinking about the mind when it's peaceful. We are thinking in a very subtle way, or contemplating, let's say, the mind when it's moving, and the difference or the relationship between the two. This is the purpose of meditation. It's the purpose of the reason that we train in shamatha in the first place. It's the whole point of developing shamatha is to have the basis to make that possible. We should know that asking these sort of questions is a much higher step, it's a much deeper step. It's not to lose something out the meditation, it's to make that meditation fulfill its true function. It's very, very profound.
Tani ta shwaja chenpo gang xingken ngong cho je chi na ta nipa xe na yung ri yo re o san jawa yo na ri re tala kari re la na korong nipa karen du ta nipa xa ko song jawa karen du di jawa xa ko song ngong cho song tani korong Tanina yon koron ridiore, Jana koron ridiore, Carisina cola chepa mere, Caresina, Koyapo sono tonson, Koyapo zongon. Tenina, Kogan Peli Rabonu, Konina yon ko Hakodi Opare, Oya San Javayona koron Hakodi Opare, Koron Javangoto di Opare. Ta, Naronso Ganjidi, Becali Cabuyore, Carisina, Nipayon Yapo Hako Mare, Javayon Yapo Hako Mare, Rosa, Takinina Gomucha de Diore, Tenina, Becali Cabo Yon Yobare. There Nomo Palayon, Serapanti Hobamare, Najala, Nindu, Dadao, Yedon, Yendu, Davo, the Muyon, Yendu, Davo, the Munisena, so the Timboya Bojuna, Yedon Chun, Naja Chun, the Muchun, Oya, Dojo Chun, Dunga Chun, Drogare, the Maroso Serando Tikobamare, Carirelana, Maroso Goya Bukibamare, Rosa, Tachi. Saint Goyon, Tromachido, the leader was the Diore, the normal Penchibu, let the Cuba Mare.
If we come to know the mind, understand the mind, recognize the mind through these Mahamudra profound method of questioning and developing insight, then we'll know the mind when it's peaceful. We'll know what that is. We'll recognize the mind of peace. We'll recognize the mind when it's busy, thinking, disturbed, neurotic, in any of the defilements, whichever it is. We'll recognize it. We'll have recognized it. Also, maybe we'll have recognized it and had that confirmed or pointed out by the teacher. In either way, through doing the practice, we recognize what's happening. That recognition is all important, because then it makes no difference whether the mind is in deep, comfortable, blissful peace, or whether it is busy, thinking this, thinking that, because in either case, the mind is known. The mind is recognized. There's no longer any need to stick a judgment of good or bad, because whatever the mind is doing, at peace, or when it's being angry, desiring, jealous, any of those things, then whichever's the case, this becomes the basis for recognition. And because of what we recognize, because of what we've come to recognize about mind itself, then there will no longer be any cause at all for thinking of good or bad meditation, because we're not dealing with sensations, but with a quality of recognition that comes on the basis of any of those states. It makes no difference anymore. Whether your mind is at peace, whether your mind is busy, there's recognition of mind itself. And that brings very, very many qualities. If there isn't the recognition, then we're still in trouble. We're still in confusion and samsara. When there is the recognition, it just makes everything so much easier. It takes a great burden off. Everything becomes easy and clear. But if not, then there isn't the benefit. So when the defilements come up, when we get angry or jealous or passionate, whatever it is, we're carried away by those things. We don't have the benefit of our meditation being able to use those things which are normally negative and harmful as a springboard, a starting point for meditation, which makes them of great use, and which, by the very nature of what we're doing, as we take each moment of busy mind or defiled mind as a basis for insight, then by the very nature of that, it actually diminishes the defilements, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Very naturally. Very, very naturally.
Tana, Tachana, Te Toji, Naroso, Notu, Chavando, Denada, Nogado, in the Tirana, Naroso Sono Tuna, Te Toji, Mangola Tennis, Sono Chitona, Te Toji, Lavano, Yobare, Hill Lavano, Tata, Tatum Bodembare, Tanga, Nipa Nayobare, Tirana, Nagnoni. 니도 대조지 디까바리 디대조지 노도 야보지 고면나 셔더라시라 고모디 다든지 데라나 땅아 미바 이게바디기 바이 다 선도로송 다 미바 이게바디기.
As we've seen, this process of recognizing mind, discovering what this word mind means or what mind is, comes through using these very, very fine thoughts, this very subtle way of contemplating while the mind is at peace or while it's active. And we're able to learn to do that because of the oral instructions, the personal advice that's given, and some of which we've received in this course. Actually, for each of these points, the mind still, the mind moving, the relation between the two, there are a series of precise questions and then precise ways of thinking so subtly as we practice, but we've had the essential. Now those first three, at peace, changing and moving, and the relation between the two, help us understand what's called the mind, or the inner mind. And this is something that actually in practice is much more easy to understand than the outer universe. If we started by trying to understand the perception of the outer universe, it will be a much harder task. So this questioning the mind, the inner mind, this inner feeling of peace, the inner feeling of emotions and so on, is the easy start. Now the fourth thing is to go on to the outer.
다 이바다 다 가리래라나 루포도 세니 다 진리된 거 따지래. 루센 끼된 거서 루센 타대된 거. 루포도 센 따지래 다. 살라디에서 이츠 우보도 해와래. 다 어서도 세야가 놓고나 선노동라. 노동이 이제 가린다 원도 다 노동 이제 전대제 가린도 세야가 전박해도 선노동래 다자. 엄마들아 다 설라고 뒤에서래. 다 당도수 지로 다시는 저 요미기데 다 나로서 담바노라 설라고 그래도 근데 세대들아나 어야 탈로보도 세다 진리된 거 선노동래.
So this fourth point is looking at the relationship, or looking at mind and body. So to see, are mind and body, are they the same? Is this one thing? Or are they separate? And how are they separate? And so on and so forth. What we've done up to now is what's called the inner, in as much as it's how we feel deep inside ourselves. When our mind is peaceful, how that peaceful feeling is, how when we're thinking how it is. And Rinpoche says he's not sure here what the general perception is over here of the body, but generally, compared with these inner feelings of peace, or the mind busy in thought, then the body seems to be something more external. It's not something deep within. So it's external, but it's still quite close. It's not far external, it's close external. And so then we examine that in relation to mind.
라 생기 요래 생기 뉘라래 가정하고 생기래 생기 되면 요 말을라래 다티 생기 요지터 나로서라 루지인데 뭐야 다 루지 요지 생기 요지 되니 코로지에서 가가래 기타 나로서 다 너무.
So then we just had a vote about whether there's one mind or many minds, two minds or more. So now we're coming to mind and body. So then we have to think, well, what's the general consensus about the body? Are we going to come to a conclusion there's one body?
다 가리즈니. 저로서 그때나 루시아를 tenso. 루시아 말을 tenso. 뭐야 카가를 tenso. 지바를 tenso라.
So then, well, what we need to see also, that's the main point of this, is the body the mind? Is it a mental thing? Are they two different things? Is it the same?
다 루, 생, 끼이나 lupo sen chipanda wina. Lulana, Bogo the war chizo shojore. Then San Lion Yachizo Shondore. Talangaros on Tongu.
If mind and body are not different, if they're the same, then we have to think about the body. It starts off as a tiny, tiny baby child, grows up into maturity, lives, and at the end dies. If mind and body are the same, one thing, then does the mind start tiny, 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 and then grow up, and then at the end die?
Then, Maroso, Mehonolandro, Lapache Gona, Labadi Mepache Gona, Saint Ezo Pachon Sandu, Gina.
If we had, unfortunately, to go to the hospital and have a limb amputated, would we lose a bit of our mind at the same time? With however much of the body's chopped off, would the mind go as well? Doesn't look like you think it would.
The body can think, but that's still there. Because the mind is almost, it's like phantom limb. How does that work?
I'm not sure if we're into dialogue yet.
Ya, ta Yimena, Kahaina, Lula Katsuna, Lula Katsuna, San Salaries of Lutari. Gina, Kahamare, on the Kahaina, Ludo, Sani Kahaina, Deni Katsuna Lula. Deni Kahaina, San Salaries of Lutari.
So, if they're different, now if they're two things, when you stick a needle, if you stuck a needle into your body, say you stuck a needle into your leg, well, the leg is part of the body, so if they're two different things, then the needle just stuck in the body. What experience is it? Is it only the body that experiences it and the mind doesn't have any experience?
Ta Kahain, you Tadoina, Benana, the Mirazona, then Matsago, Caredina, the Samare Kahara, and the Sama Lopos Caredora, then Sam Luni Kahare, Yonder Tadoina, and the Mirazona. You San Sagosandua? San Sagosandua? Tsana. Benakaguna Tsara. Did Hajata, Luciani Kahanda Wini, Tadoina? Then the Milas on you, not Sagosandua.
Dimenasana?
No, not Sagosandua.
The Chipayana?
Oh, but Benano Lupodo Sani Kahayam. Girela Mari. Gina, Lucien Gio Pare, Saint Gio Relari. Benana, Lupotia to Giegana, Lupochunra, on Saint to Chunra, the Tatamahira. Tan Ipan Mari. Tan Ipada, or Gimari Kaharelana, Takari, Ludo Sani Kahares, Takahina, Naroson Katsuna, not Sara. Tagundu. Then it's Tagundu, Kahayan Yanta Tadoina. Then the Nielas organ, not Tagons and do a Caredina, Ludo Sani in the Kahare, Tahio, the young Kahare, Tagandua.
So, if the mind and the body are two things, and if a needle is stuck in the body, which is not the mind, if then the mind does feel that, because if a needle is stuck into you, there's pain, isn't there? If a needle is stuck into the leg, the mind experiences it. That doesn't it? Well, if the body was something other than the mind, then, for instance, another object, an external object, if that was damaged, if it was burnt, or if needle was stuck into something, we'd equally well feel that. Mind and body are different, so if stick a needle into the leg, then of course our mind experiences something. If mind and body are totally different, then there'd be no difference sticking a needle in your leg and you feel something, or sticking a needle in some other object, you'd feel it as well.
Kali kabudu kari sena. Kakare dina yon kali kabudu, kire dina kali kabudu.
Difficult, isn't it? When you really start thinking about it, not abstractly, but in this way, if they're the same, then, the questions of, if you cut off a limb, is your mind lose that much? And then, if they're different, then how is it that our mind experiences the pains of the body, but doesn't experience the pains of other different things, like all the objects around us?
Then, jire la yuanana, sen kayoba, sen nayoba, oya sen la lopoyoba, sen nupore yondua. Then, sen tenji yondua. Then, sen shaje yondu, sen chap zo taigajindu. This is gonna lopochi chapa japongana sen jachorudu. Lopo chap lopo janda was segana. You're gonna say you jatama chorudu. Japarawina.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because if we think that mind and body are one, then every time the body is sick, every time there's an illness, it means the mind is ill. Every time body goes to hospital, the mind's gone to hospital. When the body is declining, deteriorating, the mind's declining. When the body dies, the mind dies. When one bit of the body is lost, doesn't work anymore, it's cut off, amputated, then the mind has lost that much. It would have to be like that if body and mind were one thing.
Kaina, not doing a nana. Caredina, Lopo Samari, Kare, not any duna, Naransopanso de Tirachian, Arara, Pesazade, Pesazade, Nazade.
If body and mind are different, then because we experience things that happen to our body, obviously the mind feels it when we stick a needle in or something. If they're different, then the logical conclusion of that, the obvious conclusion, if somebody was beating a drum, it would be like beating us. As if beating the drum would be ouch, 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 if the body is different.
The Kakachadu not the regular Chapara. Jerry watched on the Samari, Kare Nado. Lupo Samari, Kare, then Karina, Japai in Guara. They may Jabamani by Chomudua.
So that's what it means to be other than mind. It means to be something that's not the mind. So then the body would just be exactly the same as anything else that's not the mind. It would be the same as a cup or a table. It would just be another object in the universe. Our mind is one thing, and then amongst all the objects there would be a body, which would be something different. That's the conclusion.
Delicious on Tongu. The Marosa Kagada, Saint Tombare, Saint Yoba Mare, Ladina, Pentomandu. Mina Mieton, Yona Yoton. Katwa de Kijachi, son of Yuton Hakudu.
At this point, there's no use resorting to the books for answers. There's no point coming up with some fancy cop-out answer like, but everything's void, or anything like that. This needs to be actually discovered.
The Tara Sono Hichasi, Tendu Sono Tongu, Gadu, Benana, Tangaroso, Lopola, Kagapuna, Tagwari, Katwala, Ta Ina, Di Taja the Series Umari, Saina, Saint Tadi said the Carino Yod. Tandem said. Then you look at la 야포시 로포라 가레슈 드니시나 로포라 산라 대완 중와리 그래서 다 대완 중이 산다 가린다고 지래 달아서노도 차나 차지 산다 가린다고 그래 베나 느리 세원이 되라는 단다 산차레서 루차 되니 루차레 이나는 너라 느리시나 차고사도 되니 산차레 이나 산다 가린다고 지래 이나 너기 이거나 온산 면도 접지 면도 하다고 지 되든지 좋아도와 다 가리레는 느리 세상의 동거도 뭐
Then, as we actually investigate this in our contemplation, in this next step of the practice, then, however we do it, could do it with a needle, but I mean, it's obviously the case that anybody who sticks a needle into themselves will feel the pain. The mind experiences discomfort. That's very obvious. We don't need to discuss that. Anyone who sticks a needle in their leg, in their flesh, their mind feels uncomfortable. Well, there's a feeling of discomfort, let's say. So then, when there is that feeling, then this is where we need to go back to our subtle asking and observation as it's happening. Actually, what is happening? So, for instance, one could pinch. You could dig a fingernail into your thumb to create some sensation of pain. And then while that's happening, then you could be thinking, actually, what's happening? Is this experience of pain, this discomfort, this pain, this hurting, is it the body that's hurting, different from the mind? Is it the mind that's hurting when that's done? We actually need to not think about it, there's no point. We need to be aware as it's happening, to find, is it body, is it mind, what is it? If body is other than mind, then if we just stick the thumbnail into a solid surface like a table, how is that different? The table is other than mind. We don't feel it when it's in the table, yet we feel it when it's the body. The mind has an experience very rapidly, sharply. This is the sort of thing we need to investigate.
Tata, police. Tahu malalani.
The police did. Capture the catcher curry.
Shall curry like your lad.
You've got the police have arrived again. Finding out what all this self-wounding teaching is about. What's he doing? Getting people to hurt themselves. Now that in essence is this fourth stage of the practice. It is this now on-the-spot investigation of mind, body. Are they separate? Are they the same? Just how is it? This is what we need to discover, as always, not intellectually, but by direct investigation. And at the end of that, one should come to a recognition or an understanding, a true understanding of body and mind. Now the next thing we need to look at are appearances, what are called appearances, that is everything that manifests to the mind.
더 이거 가르치거라 생 이거 시도 손도 동거 바래 말로서 가르치나 생도 문제도 논리고 바래 되나 생도 가르치게 따더라 되는데 생도 이거 거 바래 말로서 다 생다기고 봐라 생다기고 되더라 생도 이거 시거 바래 이겼다 가야 그 이거 뭐야 이겼다 시도 다 손도 동거 바래.
So then we need to, in order to understand this, then first we need to understand or deal with mind as the basis.
다 대인들아 다 나로서라는 생기요래 라래 다 생기요도 되라 생기디다 가래 통할 다 거버리잖아 너와 딴데 차례 ndamara mobodiwa dole tiena chundu kawara tiena chundu ta ndona karele tiena din hwa yo to ju tang ji mala tiena din du karele tiena ina din hwa la song to go bare.
So then earlier on we came to the conclusion that mind is one, there's one mind. So then what we're looking at here with appearances are all of this that's around us, what we experience as the world, the universe, it's what we see, but it's not just what we see, it's what we hear, it's everything that is manifest to the mind, it's manifestation, it's what appears to the mind.
Ta tingdulana pena ta nganda usina dingsola sebuji hadiu bare sebure de katswa ta nganwara da wachina pada ditira 다 네 세보다 코 세보 코롱가 나라 춘통와래 네 세보 파통와래 더선도 동부도 동부.
In Rinpoche's own appearances, because he's sitting where he is and is looking towards the partition, then that partition is nearly all goldy yellow color, let's say. So assuming that this is the appearance, the manifestation, there's a yellowness out there, then the first question is, does the mind go out to discover the yellowness, or does the yellowness come into the mind?
단데 가츠마가 츠코롱한 통화를 라마르다. 가츠마가 나파 통화를 계지리 니 파통화를 계지리면 그 숭아라 통화를 라지 말이다. 뭐 나디나 가통화가
알람시
뭐야 디 노마디 숭안 통화를 니 파통화를 라라 파디바래 파통화를 라나 가통화가 니 파통화를 되면 그 같은 통화를 라지 말이 뭐야 디바리 세냐면 따지라 고냐면 농지라 고니 농지 농아 고근데 되면 오미가 따지라 어디 줄라 따지라 더 고냐면 농지다 그가 춘홍아리 니 판홍아리 라나 배는 우부조라 우부디 그가 춘홍아리 니고 판홍아리 라나 가통아 니고 판홍아리 라지리 가리리 라나 코라나 생요 말에 고추 따지요 말에 농지요 말에 나라 생요 니고 판홍아리 뭐 가통아부터 니리카 라지리.
So if we can to be more precise about that, then it's not so much of something out there coming in or the mind going out to meet it. Maybe I didn't do that too well, I can't remember. But anyway, it's more a question of does the mind project an outer appearance? Does the mind sort of radiate out to make an outer appearance? Or is it aware of an outer appearance? And so then, in that case, because we said there was one mind, and whether it's so, then this would tend towards the thing of it's the mind that creates or generates appearance.
다 디, 홍제도 다 또도 미그 통화래 되나면 미그 통화래 니 당고 보다라 미미는 통화래 미그 통화래세 든지 라지래 녀래세 마뉴캔 너 녀래세 미키캔 거 미크 통화래 되면 또 어디 미미는 통화래 든지 라지래.
Now, for most people in the general perception of things, then we'd say, well, what we're doing is we're seeing something with our eyes. Seeing something with the eyes, because if you don't have eyes, if your eyes don't work, then you don't see anything. This makes a lot of sense.
더 드리지 말해. 더 말해. 배나너 뭐 현아용 미요래 때 준통 말해. 준통 히오바 말해. 되면 뭐야 미그통 히오나 현아용 통거 말해. 때 현아용 미요라. 때 통히오바 말해. 되나 세면나 통히오바 말해.
Penaro.
로고 준통 말아. 노아요 말아. 배나 미그통 아래에서 가져와 라래디 미그통나 로고 통거래. 미라 로라 미요래.
So, but then, if it's the eyes that see, if it's the eyes that see, then corpses have eyes, but they don't see. So the seeing happens in the mind.
되니들라나 되니 세면나 노제메레 되니 다 세가 노나 베나나 세보 노나 되니 세보도 세레소 말이 나로서 손을 동거래 세보 노나 세보 노제도 세레소 말이.
So then, if we don't have a mind, then there's no what we call appearance or manifestation. It's almost by its definition, it means what manifests to the mind. It's not the eyes which see, it's the mind which sees, and it's the mind which hears, and so on. So in this case, if there's an experience of yellowness, if the appearance, the manifestation, is a yellowness, then we have to be asking ourselves the question when we look at the yellowness, is that yellow that's seen? Is that yellow the mind that's yellow or not?
세보도 가슴하고 세 마리 나오는지래. 세보고 세보래 되면 세 마리 세지래. 나디나. 막 들어가지고나 세보도 세래라나. 세 마리 세보 마리 라지래.
So then, often when people ask, when I ask people, or people are asked, they'd say, is that yellow that's being experienced, that yellow out there, or that yellow that's being experienced, is that the mind? They'd say, no, that yellow itself isn't the mind.
Then, yeah, that's 세보 세면나, 메나. then 생각 노제 세보도 살아야 공화래라나 지티나 생활에 생활에
So then if that's not the mind, then we need to ask ourselves the question, then what's having this experience? What is it that's knowing that yellow, that's aware of that yellow? This awareness of yellow, more precisely, this awareness of yellow, this yellow experience that you're having, that you're working with in your practice, if that isn't the mind, then how can it be experienced? And you say, well, it has to be in the mind, because it's the mind that's knowing, that's in that moment, it's having the yellowness.
then 뭐가 세보다 then 생활에 가서 생활에 뭐지 베나너 생활가 많도나 세보 노모디 생활 많도나 세보 뭐디 되니 생활 노나 세보 농도 더니 세보 농나 더니 생 세보 차로도 와야 세보 많이 비생하진도 달라서 어느 동도 뒤뒤라 농도비 이게 비가라 세보 농도 뒤뒤라 세보 카가 생 카가 누소문도 코지레도 와야 더니 지이나 더니 생 세보레 누소문도 오야 더니나 지면나 세면나 세보도 가리서 통과 배나 차워 이나요 더니 차원 통이 가서라 세 차워레도 더니나 가 세한테 차라지 요래 라고 님디와 다다 면나나 더니 차워도 세면나 차원 통문도 노알아서 차워 미래 차차 오야 문 누소문도
So then in our meditation, picking an experience like this yellowness that's vividly there because it's what we're looking at, then we have to ask ourselves this question. Is that yellow, is that different from mind? Are there two things? There's yellow and there's mind. There are two things. Or are they one thing, where that yellowness is the mind? If that yellow is the mind, then the mind is yellow. Has to be, doesn't it? Is, the word is means is. So if the yellow is the mind, then the mind is yellow. What is the mind? Yellow because there's the yellow experience. Or in that case, does it mean that mind and the yellow are not equal, but they are different, in which case they are two. But then if they are two different things, how can the mind have an experience of yellow? Because they're different. That yellowness is not an intellectual question, it's to look at. This yellowness that you're experiencing as you're looking, if it's different from the mind, then how is the mind having that experience? If it's something other in your mind.
얘나 도노나 노 세메나 도노문디 더니 도세니 지레라서 가가레는디 지이나 나세나 도레는디 카이나나 오야 세메나 도노문디 가레는디 괜찮다고 지도야 오야 달라이 야보지다거든.
Let's take a rock, for instance. When you're aware of a rock, then again, is it two different things or the same thing? So if it's the rock that's the experience, the manifestation of the mind, if the rock is the experience, then is the mind a rock? Is our mind stone? Is mind stone? But then if it's different, if we think, no, they're so different, a rock, a border is one thing, mind is so different, then in that moment of having experience of the rock, then how, if they're different, what is this experience, if it's not the mind that's having it?
다 검지 많이 캔도 검이 캔가 센센데 도도리 전지리 같이 센도 센라 도도리 전지리 다 저로서 디스오노 돈이야 말이 등가만이 뜻어노 돈도 다나라 나로서 고하는 좋아요 말이 더 가리리에서 써서노 돈거 말이 운이 베나 돈노나 되니 세마 노나 도 가리zo 돈고도 노 말아 세면은 돈노도 돈노아 샤 말아 되니 노아 샤제 도레서 말이 되니 알아서 뭐만 가리지나 저 도도 센센 된디라 다따라 현주시에 근데가 세면은 된 돈노도 돈노모도야 롱어라 되니 뭐만 가가리 돼야지 가가 랭거서 뭔데 따거든 또 무슨 뭐만 그니 보셔 이봐 지난다 손노 이봐 도 세니 가가리 돼야지 바로 뭐만 그 손노 동동들아 이 손노 동동도 리거서 리면데 달라지 따거든 되이나 배나는 돈노나 문이 sen yo gundu sen me na do no mundu do no na sen no de tera na sen da do re ro so re ro mundu oya ta ta la yo ko so no chi tong gundu.
We got to say before, first of all, Rinpoche extended the yellow thing to other colours, and then at the end of the last bit, he said, strange, isn't it? Strange, isn't it? And if somebody is not a meditator, they've not actually worked with these direct experiences, then they just say, oh, come on, mind's mind, a rock's a rock, they're different things. There's no way you call a rock is mind. There's no way you'd say mind's a rock. Mind's mind, rock's a rock, this is this, that. But then, that's what a regular assumption is. But then, if one only needs to do a tiny bit of reflection about this to see that that can't be the case, because if they were two different entities, the mind could never experience the rock. If they're different, how could rock ever get into mind? How could mind ever get into rock? They're two different things. How would you get a rock into your mind? How would you get your mind into a rock if they're two different things? The very fact that there's the experience of a rock, that we know a rock, there's any idea of a rock, some experience of a rock, is because we have a mind. No mind, no experience of a rock. The rock is a mental experience. I mean, that's very easy to start to understand. But then quite how that works, well, we can't say, well, the mind, the rock is the mind, therefore the mind is a rock by nature, and so on. Then this is something we need to investigate. And what we mainly need to do is to see if our assumptions that come through our mind's habits, through age-old habits, we assume this, we assume that, mind's mind, rock's rock. We need to see, are these assumptions true? Or just, how is it really working?
Tati noa la sono tongdu, tongbo te to jingaro so gambye gundu noa de, ndi so kya jo, ina tongni koronta la sono tongna, te so tongbu ka sa le kali kabundu, te na pena noa kare li na ndi kabo mabo do, ta noa kare khana ji kare ne cheba mundu, te ndi tira te so ji gambye te so ji sen te so ji ma ni para ji ya po ji shon, te ni sono tongdu, de ma tongni sono tongna, kali kaburu, ira ji hore tongbu ka da. Tendira tombote to ji sen ni jo ni pa da wo chi ho na de ni da da ka ri no go du je ren du so de ni hecha so so no dong de.
Now when we actually do this practice, we don't dive into it straight away, so that we just sit down, take some object that's manifest to our mind, and then start this process of investigation. Is it something separate? Is mind and the experience, the yellow, the rock, or whatever it is, the same? That will be very difficult. We won't be able to do anything except have discursive thought if we do that. So then what we do, we can take any manifestation, doesn't matter. It can be a colour, it can be an object like a rock, it doesn't matter at all, any external manifestation. And then first we need to sit with it for a while. Take it as an object of settling the mind. So we just settle the mind on it, be aware of it for a while. And then once we've been with it for a while and the mind's settled with awareness of that object, of that manifestation, then within that presence, that calm presence of the object, then we ask these subtle questions of, is there two things? Is it one thing? And so on.
Tani ta ti ji la na, tani dra, dro, ro, re ja ta ni bo ta yo bara, ta cha la re yen ba la. So no tong din du ta su yu da wo ta tong xie ni, ta su ya bo xi sa de ngan ya da yong rong xi go. Xi sa de xin ro ba re. Ti ya bo ji xin ro de le ka zong ya bo ji xin ro ba re. Be na hin da bo ji de, hin ma ji ya bo ji zan yu ma ka zong da ga ko ro ba re. 비단라고지 들이기 야부지디 히자들 내가 카트마다 신호 말이 정용고 말이리라세로 손도 동거 말이 하고도야 뉴마 뉴마지 제나 가린다고 진디 되디나 되니 뉴마 카트마 가리고 하고 말 베대간다 바로서 지 야부지 히소나 되니 내가 카트마디 신호도 이 리리 온달라지다 다 되니 조가나 통할 공도 말이 정가 판로 제메리디 지 히사나 되니 용주 더 하고 말이 되니나 되니 조다로 리리라 야부지다 되니 세는데
usually we start with a visual object for this, with color or looking at a rock or whatever it is, and we come to develop on the spot understanding of the mind in this circumstance of experiencing manifestation or appearances. Then we go on to sounds and to odors and flavors and physical sensations. But once it's been understood with one thing, actually that we'll find that same experience, that same realization, same understanding will apply to all of the other things which manifest to the mind through the five senses. It's like if you've cut one bamboo and you've analyzed it, then you know all bamboos. You don't need to go and cut every single bamboo in the world to make sure they're the same. So like this, once we've understood the relationship or the nature of mind and its experience through things that are seen or heard or smelled, tasted, then we'll realize as we go through the senses how it's the same for all the things which are seen, heard or experienced.
되니 다다 계정 미바테니 대조지 갈리 가보요 말이 대조 고가보래 야 되니 가서 험마 계지 미바선다 대조 레라보라고 요래 고롱선노도나 대인디 되라 동보 가로서 미바 동보 되니 미바 되니 선바 되니 여바 되니 나바 레레레레서 끼고마서 바디 gem발 싫어 마가 기도 동보 고죠 되니 기도 고터래 되니 미바도 가 되니 미바도 고터래 되니 선바도 가 되니 선바도 거래 여바 되니 여바도 거래 나바도 가 고르마노 바지 니 고르도 트이노다 제가 세고 말이 우니 나로고다 나로서 녀네 시들이 세고나 드리서 고르기 세고 깔라도 지 손노 동동 나로고 파티 거래 드리세나 배 배도라고 요선도 뭐냐 드리서 손노 야부지 동나 되니 소지sembo 야부지 가히지가 해요.
The two topics that we covered today, so topic 4, which is mind and body, and topic 5, which is this dealing with appearances, working with appearances. So now we've covered all 5, but these two from today are much more subtle topics. They're quite difficult. When we actually come to them, the sort of discoveries or questions that they bring when we're actually doing the practice are not so straightforward as the first ones, where we're just having the mind that's settled in shamatha, and then coming to know what that settledness of the mind, that peacefulness of the mind is, and then when the mind starts to think, to know what that thinking is. These are fairly straightforward things to do, relatively. And then the relation between stillness and movement. Now this body and mind question, and mind and all of its appearances, everything that manifests as the world and its objects, is a much more subtle, difficult point to crack, to really come to know. So this is why we do them in order. We start with the first one, we get that done very well, we find the conclusions, and then this leads naturally on to the second one and the third one. In the way this is presented in the text, then there are various points, one after another, that we could have gone through, but Rinpoche has preferred to give us this instruction from his own knowledge and experience of these 5 stages of meditation, because he feels that it's more direct, it's more person to person, there's more benefit than if we simply were all going through the text and following it word for word, idea for idea, we'd lose something. And he hopes that this direct talking about these 5 topics and instructions in a very simple way of doing them, not in all the complexity we find in the text, will really help us to practice, and that based on what we've received, that our Mahamudra practice will really be assiduous and fruitful. Assiduous and fruitful.
너는 내 앞에서 걸어오죠? 같은하고 곰미게 같은하고 니 리리리라 손으로 옆에서 고. 근데 우리 저지 뭐 고 신게 아니나? 근데 저 고하나 나가보요. 마고나 나가보요. 가리 세나 나가보요. 가리 라리리라나 고하나요. 드리지 니 라지트라 고하나요. 리데르 코 가리레지나 니파 하고리오레 자와 하고리오레 테탈서 어노도나 코로치 노바치몬디 라 가리치나 카츠와 조코 하고리오레 테텐리서 어노도나요 코라 노바요바 마레 어서노 마도나 코 히디오레 저 가리치나 나가보요 고 힌케나 고 마힌케나 딱 니파 젠다 고거든
네파
고 힌케기도 고 마힌케 니오레 고 마힌케가 니 라제트라 리리리도 니파 젠다 고거든 고 힌케이나 어야 니 라제트 고나 나가보요 마고나 나가보요 가리치나 나가보요 가리지나 고나요 고롱거 니파 하고디오리 자와 하고디오리 모아 하고디 카타 하고디 달아요 손노 동데네 제바요바 마레 가리시디나 콜라 제요 마레 호야 테니나 오 마가나 고롱 히디오리 제바만디 가리나 가보디
마가나 셰테테
마디마 shoiba chemo gong hinkia china ni laji de magona koron hidiore ridiore
aso
noya gona yo koron to gon ridiore cheba mere.
And so we need to Rinpoche hopes we'll have a successful and diligent practice, and that when we do the practice, we do them properly in the order. But whatever's the case, I mean, here we've had most of the people who said they have done the practice, some haven't done the practice yet, but even for those who've done the practice, some have done it, some haven't done it, but for him, it's the same. He'll be happy in either case. If we do the practice, we go through all the stages, we gain some understanding of how the mind is when it's settled, how the mind is when it moves, the relationship between the two, mind and body and so on. This will make him happy, but anyway, he's happy in either case. Even if we don't get the understanding out of the practice, the understanding of Mahamudra, nevertheless, it still means that we are practicing it and working on it.
Ta tini ngoni ta majuba gonchuri, ta hitare tini majuba gonchuri. Ngarozo majuba la di dua mo. Oya tamaje hipa, majubi hipa. Diri se sendu yedera. Ta ngoni ta ngadi hitade tini gonchuri.
So if we're practicing, whether it's based on Rinpoche's instructions from this course, or we're practicing Mahamudra some other way, one way or another, we'll get there. And when we get there, then, through this direct experience of the mind, then we'll know what uncontrived state means. And this word, like beyond conceptual fabrication, uncontrived, that we hear so much, we read so much in the text, if we actually do the meditation, then quite what that means will be crystal clear.
Garirelana, nipa tini nipa ngoncho song, jawa tini jawa ngoncho song, nejini garire tini nejini ngoncho song, lusiani garire tini lusiani ngoncho song, oya noa tongche garire gazin noa tongche ngoncho song, ta mai bi ga tan zhanji dian mere no to, sino niga katwa ngoncho song, teni senonya ya po ngonto za de la teni gari sena teni kyugomen da ta ma ju pare so ngoni ma ju pa se ta ma re bare kar shino ka twa de ngonto za re teni ngonto ta kyugomare ngoni teni ta ma ju pa se re ngaro so ma ju pa pa de jo je pa le pena no to le gona ta go ma re go ma yin pa ji pi pon teni su ji drug bare teni ma ju pa gari re di pon ji da de ju tu sa de teni ya po do du pon du se go la teni la gon de teni go je teni ya po de su le ga da teni o ju sa de teni go da ju ma re do le di ma ju pa ji ka ji re mo de ka so ju ma re do le ta ma ji ki pa re me re ga re ji na rong ga yo ji mo de tu se ge de ti no teni usu ko nga de ya po ngo cho sa de ma yi bi gong chu me re mo de ta nga de ngo cho sa teni 다 문이 다 마주 바리 가래 봉가 말이 가래나 카츠와도 가토들이 더 많이 비추면요 다 마주 바시 되는 가비 고히래.
The reason for this is very straightforward and logical. It's because in these 5 steps what we've come to do is to actually know, to directly know beyond any doubt how the mind is when it's still. We've come to know beyond any doubt how the mind is when it's thinking and moving and changing. We've come to know the relationship, the difference and the change between still and moving, all those 3 inner things. And beyond that, we've come directly to know what is body, what is mind, what is their relationship, how does that work? And we've come to know anything that manifests at all to the mind, anything whatsoever, how that is. Now, there isn't anything else apart from all of that. It's all the inner, it's all of the outer, and by doing the practice, then we know them for exactly as they are. There is no need to think, how are they? There's no need to contrive concepts about, this is like this is like that. They are directly known. So there's no contrivance in that way. There's no need for conceptual fabrication. And also because now we know them, then for instance we saw in Nepal that we had at the beginning of the lecture that there's this general or good meditation, bad meditation thing, and as soon as thoughts start to come up we say go away, you're not meditation, and meditation is just being calm. That's contrivance. That's what contrivance means. It means artificial doing, artificial thinking. So first of all we're thinking, that's bad. We're constructing a value judgment, a thought, an idea about it. And then secondly we're contriving because we're trying to get rid of it and to stop it and to make peacefulness. This is contrivance. So then that's no longer the case. When the mind is moving, when it's busy, if it's neurotic, then we know the mind itself. We know that neurosis for what it is. It's no longer any reason to call it good, bad. There's no reason to chase it away, to enhance it, to do anything with it. There is no longer, because of the vivid and direct understanding, no need for any contrivance. And there we will genuinely be beyond thinking, contriving, doing. So it's the state free from complication, free from contrivance.
Lucien daje de dong, mo daje de hicha pe se cheyo ma mare. Da te de ka le kho yo re. De na ngama da ga me na pyan do yo ba mare. De ni da sa ji mo dong zang ji na da song no dong to xia xia ji ji cheyo. De ni yan ba da da ji na de zo hicha da wo so ma ro cheyo. Dindila da joro so 가르레 나 하고 뭐지 마시베 nga gon ki pa yo jire yani chotong do manaba ngaro yo pe ki pa yin jire maje nga pe gon kyo bo yo jire yani manaba ko gon mi ki pa yin jire ta gon ta ju wona jerusalem ji che yo re din din di de la na joro so ya bu jo gon.
These last 2 points about body and mind and about the appearances of the mind are actually treated quite specifically in the text. There there is a detailed explanation of how to meditate on them, and there's details to explain about them. And Rinpoche hasn't given these on purpose because they're only really appropriate for those who've gone through the earlier stages and those who've reached conclusions, some awareness or realization of the earlier stages. Without that, then they don't make much sense or they don't have much benefit. So this is why he's not gone through them. As for the first 3 steps about stillness, movement, and stillness and movement, then he gave us not all of the explanation that was in the text, but the main points of the meditation. And the reason he didn't go through all of those for the first 3 or barely any of them for the last 2 is because it's impossible to know what each person's meditation experience and realization is. There might be some people who have very mature in meditation with lots of experience, or maybe some people who have barely any. So this is why it's not the sort of right time and place yet. But anyway, Rinpoche has given us those instructions and explanations in the hope that we will actually take them and practice them well. And so Rinpoche is wishing that in the future we'll be able to meditate in the authentic, uncontrived state, not the false, uncontrived state, where we just sit and think, the uncontrived state. He hopes we'll be able to really meditate in the true one. So then that brings us to the end of this particular section of the course. Now we've finished our studies of the Mahamudra prayer, and then we just looked at the watch. Dhruva, you had it? So I have, let me say, inviting questions, but I have a written question. If you give me a moment, it's a bit long, so I need to...
Can I make it a bit shorter?
Yeah, that might be better. It's a lot to translate.
It was to go back to what I asked you before. To go back to what I asked before, basically. It's to do with body and mind, really.
Just really boil it down to the essential question if you can.
I have a continuous experience, very continuous experience. It's a bit like one of those things in the window there, in between the 2 panes of glass. I experience pain here in my heart that filters what I can see is absolutely clear inside and outside, but it sort of everything passes through that. Physical, it's not a physical experience, but it feels, you can feel it. Pain, but it's emotional. It's my mind, And just looking at it and questioning it doesn't actually do anything. Maybe a little bit temporarily, but it doesn't go away. Now about the body and the mind, different sitting states affect your mind, you feel it quite directly. But also, just general experience. And what I wanted to ask Rinpoche about was this filtering system, which isn't conceptual, it's actually a physical experience. What is it? And it is very like that. It's very, if you wanted to put it in a picture form, it would look, I could sort of visualize it in that way.
Katsange jiwa marang Rinpoche kundun katsange yongare. Then dege Ningla te Nazeki Kola te Driwachi Yure. Then Yapo Hakoma Sonka Sang. Then the Dujungi Nyamyong Yure, second. The Dunjungi Nyamyong de Penakegong. Some the Lakongi Gegong. Gegong Kitama. Then the Shunige Bala, the Rimochi Yore. Pen Nangla Semyana, Chila Nangwayana. Then the Nipaki Badu Dujuna Gi Nazege Sowa Drapo Dujuna Yore. The Morante Kare Hakugamendo.
Yeah. 당에 더 소노동도 쳇차와래. 나사가 동하더 나도래서 나도 말이. 세래서 말이. 더니 달라서노 가리도 동거리니 가서와 쳇차와래. 드디면 로금 거면도 쳇차지더라래. 배나나 나 나송 나 차송 세마디 봐요지도. 오면은 니봐. 오면은 이제 와. 나도 공로 진지래. 더니 더 가리래 그다도. Putugundu, on a tayabo, Jitawanatani,
I did my best. I mean, it's very hard to translate that sort of experiential language, given my terrible Tibetan. But I think got it across. I hope. But anyway, Rinpoche said the explanation he's given should cover that, because you've either got the mind that's totally at peace or the mind that's moving. And it has to be one of those two. And we have to take that experience, that difficulty, that pain, whatever it is, which we normally call the moving mind, because there isn't just total peace, then that in itself becomes the focus for this questioning. And he says it has to be well done. We have to meditate well on it, which means we have to give it the time to actually find out how it is, where it comes from, all those things he explained.
요면나 드리트지노라 루시아니 지리엔가서 타데레가서 루고노니 이나나 다 근데 루시아니 지리엔가서 가리레는 마드리 라야 더서노도니 하고 그래.
Then also the instructions he gave today about body and mind, where again we're not sitting thinking about it, but we're actually sitting, as we've learned to do in the first practices, to sit and discover and ask ourselves these questions about what feels to be a physical experience, what feels to be, is it in the body, is it in the mind, where is it, how is it? No, but that's answer. He's saying, what he keeps saying is we have to meditate well until we find the answer.
I've done it for a long, long time, you know. I mean, I really have sat with it for a long, long time. And I don't come to any, that's the thing, I don't come to any answer.
De dusu rinpo la de samo tansong, tache tansong, yene lemba tomasong. Keep working on it.
I wasn't sure how to vote in the poll. When later, Rinpoche said we should see if our assumptions and our age-old habits have been true. I tried to say why, I wasn't sure. Last night I was meditating and I had a short time when it seemed as if I was looking at maps and the idea of the mind was actually unnecessary. And my question is
the katsangi gongjabdo, the sem secondly, the junga disemre, disemare, disemrebe, the semgi men kukamendo, the driva should jijna go, jijna driva de shu kukamendo, the sem yore, sem yomare, karare, the shipamato, sem kukamendo.
Shipamato sem kukamendo. Lare. Shipa sem lare.
So, well, awareness is the mind, isn't it?
What I found myself questioning was whether the idea of mind limits awareness.
It's a bit different. The sem second ki namto. The sem ki namto. The shiparong the penata chekendo ta yare penata je yare penante shipata chung la ta dang dempa drogire shiparong semge de semre semmare semge samlotangjo semge ko
Akumaso
de pena shipa yore shipa namto gogmendo shipa la kapala namto yore kapala namto yore shipa rangrewa semge shipa
semge shipa la notu gomendu shipa notu mari notu gojimo goji chomere shipa notu ra
de yore buchela pena naso dujun pena kechela tene sem segundo tene naranso ge samsul drensul ge ngala sem ge mengyore chijna meng de namto de zenye de chung re tadang den pare ngane ge shipa la taye pare shipa tadang den pare namto yena tadang den pare
mare
no
semena notu gonji mere semena hipa de gonji mere semena hipa gonji mere di hipa de senre diore deni ta yona nyagalan ta yore ta mena nyagalan ta mere ya hipa semena hipa yore 코로나 지치도
semrange ko mare je semge namto ke ko
맞지 너도 세래 세면은 너도 가리래 와래 너도 메나 세하고니 메래 메메나 더 와요 말아 근데 거기는 너도 세면은 세만이 너도 가리죠리 더 코로 하고나 더니 인지도래 너도 되나 미래 세되나 미래 더더 너는 세면은 너도 요래 세면은 너도 쓰래 문제 있어도 세면은 너도 매면 세도 문제写거라다 근데 잘론데이나 너 대마래 너 그래서 가가 세진도와 다 너도 가가 생각가 기시도 더니 하고라 세면 너도 매면 세도 가리리 더니 하고 또 요나 더니 당가서 담은 더니 배나는 가가 있나 더니 다요반 담이 봐세 좀더 릴레레 더 요요레 가가 세죠나 매나 너도 세니 가가 세지 매래
Well, the thought of mind is the mind. if there's no mind, there can't be thoughts. So the thought of mind is the mind, just like awareness is the mind. And we can't separate mind as one thing, actual mind, and the thought of mind as something else. But we say it's a limiting thing. If the thought was something other than mind, there'd be two things with two natures, they'd be apart. As it is, the thought of mind is an activity of the mind, just like what we call awareness without thoughts is an activity of the mind. If we approach it that way, then, well, that's the way to approach it, to understand that there has to be mind for there to be thoughts and concepts like mind, like the concept of mind. There has to be mind for there to be awareness. So so if there was, it's very simple, if there was no mind, could there be thoughts? Or concepts like mind?
The problem I have about meditating on this thing, this experience, is that everything else comes and goes quite easily in my mind. That mind just releases itself from sound and everything. It's continuous. Colours and sounds and birds, everything's coming and going quite freely. But this isn't. So why isn't it? That's the thing. Why? Why is there some kind of, it's an unconscious grasping? It must be. But what of? You see?
Yeah.
Just
Chushendak, Yongindu, Drogindu, Yenya, Digi, Nyamyonde, Dit Sorwadi, the Namake, Shuyak, the Nazer, Ningla, Dujuna Nazer, Benakikung, Pege, Drabo, de Benachush, Shenda Drabo, Chushena Metapare, Tingani Metapare, Yenya. The Dujuna Yore, the Hakugananda, Yanda, the Kitchenson Kare, Shenda Yongido, Drogendo.
Ta tombo choro kare Hakugandu, Ladi Tirana. Ni the Karinda would do is the Choro Tani Tagandu. Kitney with the Choro, Salayoji, Nola Yoji, no the Metunda with the Karinda would do Taganducho. Then initially Yoji the Carri, no Yoji the Carri, the Para Yoji the Carri, Tenihako, tell us on the tom.
His answer is bringing you back to these practices. So he said, take the example where you said it's like the insert in the double glazing, where there's something in between what's experienced and the experiencer that's all the time there. He says, for instance, try to, when it's happening, then take it as the object of analysis. Is it inside? Is it outside? And take that as the focus. No, not answer the question. Take it as the object of the analysis in the meditation to find the answer. So it says, if you do this when you say it, then go to the meditation about body and mind.
Here
you've got skin, flesh. No, listen. There's no point asking him a question if you don't listen to the answer. It's to waste his time. says here you have skin and flesh and bones and muscle. So is it physical? For instance, this.
Then
Then it's not there. There is something physical.
Well, you can see the sky.
So,
If you're warm, when the sun is shining, if you're warm, it's not physical.
this is going to be endless. I mean, especially with the translation, you've no idea how much is lost in translation. I think his answer, and it's going to keep coming back like that, he's going to want you to actually meditate, not to think, to meditate. No. And this is what he wants, that's his answer to you. Seems to be each time.
Ta gadu ha go ware lana kari shoje chembo gadu ngonto na didu ha go ware ta ngonto ma wa da ha go mare.
So until there is this direct understanding of the nature of the mind, this direct introduction, or if we say pointing out, it sounds like somebody else does it. Until there is this direct discovery of the nature of mind, maybe there won't be a total answer.
Shoje chembo ngonto si si ta ngonto mo do mi pa si to de ri zo here.
In order to get to that point where you would get the answer to all questions, but this question, then we need to go through these progressive steps, one by one. It's the only way. They need to be actually practiced.